Hey everyone, so Blind Modeler is back with a brand new project at the workbench. Well, I should say this isn't a brand new project, but this is a continuing project. And what we have here is a Chessie slug unit that basically the Chessie System had 13 of these on their roster, and they were mainly used in yard switching service. So they were cut down from GP9 and GP7 units and filled with concrete. They retained their traction motors, so they were often paired up with either GP39s, SD20-2s, or NW2s. And typically, if they were paired up with NW2s, they might have an extra slug unit in tow, and they were called TR3 or TR4 sets. Most of the times, from most of the photos that I've seen, CNO units were paired with CNO units and BNO units were paired up with BNO units. But as is usual in railroading, there is always an exception out there. But as I said, that most photos I've seen, they were always paired up CNO to CNO, BNO to BNO. And unless somebody has a picture out there to prove me otherwise, I'm going to go with that for now. But anyhow, I kind of like building these unusual units and doing things like, especially this one where I decided to go ahead and add a motor and power this up, and I'm going to install DCC on this, and that's what in the process I'm doing right now. Most of these, as far as the prototype is concerned, are still operating under the CSX, so that's kind of a cool thing to know. The way the genesis of this project, I saw pictures of a few of these units, basically on Chessie Photo Archives and the Chessie System diesel locomotives books, and pics I've seen out there, actual photographs if anybody remembers those. But I had a front range GP7 shell, and then I also had a lifelike GP9 hood end that was left over from a project. It was that I used to build a GP9R in Grand Trunk from a project many years ago. And then I also used the front range walkway and underframe, and then I also used Atlas Kato GP7 trucks, and I used an NWSL Sagami motor. Then on top of that, I had an Athearn GP9 underframe, which basically I just cut the bolsters off and used underneath here. So when I cut down the GP9 frame, I should say the body from the front range shell, I glued in, cemented in some styrene strips in here to keep everything squared up and to get this out to length. And basically you just measure this up against a regular size GP9 and you have your length. And then I filled the center with .080 styrene, and that might have been .060, but in either case, I installed it on the top and the sides, filed everything down to fit, then puttied it and sanded the corners and sanded them to follow the contour of the hood ends. I filed one end completely flat, as you could see here, the side with the Chessie logo, installed grab irons. And what was nice about retaining, I used just only the front ends, only because I didn't have to worry about filing and sanding off fan detail. And then on top of that, you still retain this plate with the rivet detail on top and the sand fillers hatches. And then on top of that, there's also door detail. Well, this side's blank, but the door detail on this side, and that's on both ends here. So after I got all that put together, Then I moved to the underframe. I removed the fuel tank skirting, removed the battery boxes, and then after removing the battery boxes, I filled the hole left by the battery box with some styrene as well. The same width that I used for the body. Then what I decided to do in addition was add plastruct walkway material on top, and it makes the walkway just a little bit thicker. It's not too noticeable, but when you sand it smooth and paint everything up, it's really not that noticeable. The one thing it does is it adds some strength and integrity to the frame across this way. But I also added a styrene block under here to give for a place to mount the motor. And I cut the bolster ends off the GP9 underframe from the Athearn frame and glued them in here. So they're in there basically permanently. Then I, of course, installed the NWSL motor here. I linked it up to the Atlas GP7 and Kato trucks. And this is actually a very smooth running with these trucks. And on top of that, I originally had Athearn trucks underneath this, but because these are already wired up, it makes it much easier to solder everything together. I'm planning on installing the decoder on this side and run the wires over this way to the LEDs that I have installed in here. If I hadn't said so already, like I said, I filed this side smooth where the Chessie logo is, installed grab irons. Then on this end, and this is actually considered the rear end even though it has the headlight casting, and I'll explain that here in a second. And number boards, grab irons, handbrake detail. So the reason why this would be considered the rear end, now if you think of actual locomotives on the Chessie system, the front end was typically marked with the Chessie cat logo on the front, and then the cab number was always on the front with the sub lettering. So as you see here, if this was a full-size unit, this would be the front. And of course, it's also marked by the FRA standard of the F at the front of the, right there in front by the steps. So I maintained using the front range handrails on the ends, and then I did the handrails out of brass and Smoky Valley stanchions. Added some air hose detail and MU steps and Katy couplers, of course. So if you could see here, I've installed LED lights in it already. Just waiting for my decoder to come. Then after I get the decoder installed, I'm going to add weight on the inside up here in the shell, and I'm going to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the flywheel up here, and it should be plenty of clearance back here behind the motor and over the truck housings. But here it is I have this on the test track because I'm making sure that I clean up the wiring and make sure everything runs smoothly. There you go. So I think I'm probably going to go with a lock pilot for this decoder, only because I have low sound decoders in I have two SD20-2s and a GP39, and I'll probably go with a lock pilot so I can it'd be just easier to pair them up. Oops. And then I guess one other detail to note is I added louvers. Those are Detail Associates parts, which unfortunately they're out of business. And I filed those down very, very thin, sanded them very thin, and then just glued them in place. So well guys, so this is a continuation of my slug project, and one of the things I had to do, the original can motor that I had in there was just a little bit too big and it was causing a bit of issues. So I removed it, and I actually had a smaller motor in my parts box, and it was actually taken from an Atlas locomotive. So it has actually both flywheels, but they're much smaller, and it seems to fit inside much better, and I'm able to place the wires out of the way and it causes way less noise, and it actually runs a lot better and smoother and slower with the Atlas motor in there. So there it is with the hood cover on. The decoder's coming in later today, so, but that's how it runs without just the motor, without the decoder. So can't wait to get the decoder and then fine-tune this. So, but there you have it. It definitely runs very quiet, much quieter I should say than it did with the other can motor. I wasn't pleased with the way that other can motor was running. Not sure why. It was causing a little bit tougher to get it to slow down and run smoothly, but this Atlas motor seems to do the trick. And like I said, now I have 2 flywheels on it, and it runs a lot quieter and smoother. So just simply by having a smaller motor, I can move the wires out of the way so they don't bind the flywheels, and a lot less motor noise, and still have plenty of room for the decoder and adding some weight. So this is part 2 of my slug project, and that'll continue shortly once I get the decoder. Well, there you have it, guys. There's my operating slug, and the rest of this is just going to be programming all the stuff. But yeah, I got my lock programmer installed last night, testing it out on the layout today, and it runs great. Like I said, I did this with a lot of parts from my parts box, one being the Atlas motor that I used instead of using the NWSL motor, which, like I stated earlier, was a little bit too big, and the Atlas motor was a little bit smaller. And I think I remember the Atlas motor coming from an -840 CW project from a long time ago that basically I bought really cheap and had was using for parts, and but the motor fit in. I did have to do a little retrofitting with the Drivetrain, so it went from an Atlas motor to Athearn splines to or an Atlas motor to Athearn splines to Atlas GP7 trucks. So it's a mishmash of the drive shaft, but it works, it runs smooth, and as you see, I have it using the lights on it, and it runs by itself, which is pretty cool. So there you have it, guys. Still have to work on doing some modifications to the body so that it stays on and stays centered. But there you have it, my operating slug. Well, blind modeler out, everybody. Catch you on the other side.